Welcome back. This is Daybreak, and thank you for staying with us. This morning we have the esteemed presence of Professor Noah Midamba, Dr. Duncan Ojwang, Suba Churchill, and Ahmed Hashi here on the broadcast. Coming to you, Ahmed, on this point of the lacking attention from the world and the position we had taken. Who is quoting Kenya with this apparent flattery and instant gratification to get or wade into conflicts?
Just 2 weeks ago, the United Arab Emirates called for a ceasefire in the Sudan because of Ramadan. The United Arab Emirates is widely alleged in credible international organizations and the press, is the main funder, financial backer of the RSF. And you know, the Abu Dhabi, the UAE does not produce gold. This fellow Hamdani has a gold mine in the Sudan. And all that gold goes to the United Arab Emirates. Now, Saudi Arabia is on the opposite side helping Burhan. Israel, before the explosion, sent its deputy foreign minister. They sent a very strong delegation. Because of the Red Sea and Port Sudan, which is right next to it. So Sudan is a very strategic country. The global forces that are in the Sudan can be encapsulated by George Bush, who was given a mineral map of the Sudan. And when he looked at it, he said, oh my God. It's in one of his autobiographies. The South Sudanese, the division and secessionism in Sudan occurred under the aegis of the amount of minerals and gold that are in South Sudan. Yasin Yusuf, a very close friend of mine, pointed this out to me a while ago and told me the main thing about this conflict is gold and oil and reason. He's right. The fact of the matter is that unless the idea of slavery, idea of racism, the idea of neocolonialism, and the African people's utter rejection of a new form of slavery from the Middle East that wants to come and overthrow civility in our region. Somalia is another example of that intervention. Lastly, there is a slogan that that was there during the revolution, and my colleague just talked about it. It's called Taskut Bas, just said fall. This transformation that was coming to the Sudan was not acceptable to the military and to international powers, because what it did was to express the civilian form of democratic government that they wanted. So what was fought in the Sudan, apart from these issues of resources, was the culture that was emerging from the Sudanese people for change in their country. And that's the tragedy of that situation in Sudan. And I tell you, no matter what government is brought there, or whatever peace is being brought, that revolution is going to come back because people want government of the people, by the people, and for the people in Sudan. Okay.
And Prof, given that America is more preoccupied with ending the Russia-Ukraine war now, Marco Rubio, its foreign secretary, for the first time in 3 years, met Sergei Lavrov in Riyadh, a rather unusual playground for Washington and the Kremlin. How then can Kenya be part of the third-party element here, an African voice, to rather create a rapprochement, detente between these two warring factions, instead of hosting one here, with the risk of creating diplomatic war between Khartoum and Nairobi?
You know, I've watched Trump for many years. By the way, I met him when he was a businessman. I don't think Trump go to bed and wake up in the morning thinking about anything about Africa at all. And I think what Trump is thinking is, what is it they have that we need to have? And how do we need to get it? So there is no any rational policy that we are going to expect during Trump administration, except what I will call extraction. How do we do it? Divide them and conquer. Is this what happened at the Berlin conference? It is all over again, Ayub. It is all over again. And, you know, whether it's Kenya or AU and Africans, desires to unite. Now, where's that unity coming from? You know, Nyerere say, wait a minute. Don't talk about unity. First of all, let's bring it by region. Let our region unite and we have a substantive outcome. And then you can now bring the rest of Africa. But you know, Africa, everyone right now sitting in wherever they're sitting, whether it's China, whether it's Russia, whether it's America, whether it's Europe, they're all thinking, how do we go and get the maximum out of Africa? There's a real chilling war going on in the DRC right now. They're butchering each other. Those people were brought here by Uhuru and said, let's talk. Let's broker peace so you can get back and settle that place. The rest of the world don't want peace in Africa. And they care less what happened here. And so America will care less what happened to Kenya, what happened to all this country, except what we're going to get. And if we can get the person we can use for what we need, yes, that is going to happen.
All right. So let's now turn our attention, Dr. Ojwang, coming to you, to what happened in Africa's diplomatic capital, Ethiopia, where you are. And on Saturday, the election of the African Union Commission chairperson, which went to Djibouti, is Mahmoud Yusuf Ali, its foreign minister for a very long time, who now succeeds Musa Faki Mahamat as the new chairperson of the Continental Commission. Dr. you are part of the team that was there, and you are part of the secretariat? Part of the team that had helped Odinga formed. All right. What then went wrong?
Thank you. Maybe before I get to the AU briefly, remember the Somali government was formed in Isili, and they have been happy thereafter. Right in Isili, transported back to Somali when it was almost impossible to do it back at home. You look at the Sudan situation, and Kenya is neutral, but there is what we call strategic neutrality. It doesn't mean you don't have an interest, but it means that your interest and the way you act is that you are neutral strategically. If you look at the situation there, the two warring factions are actually, you know, they were on the same side for al-Bashir. Right now, they have refused any dialogue. And it kind of work that if you create such a crisis, you will force now parties maybe to talk for the sake of a ceasefire and then transition to a peaceful election after that. Because right now there is a standoff and nobody's listening to each other, but people are dying. And therefore there is a need to step up a little more. Now, when it came to the AU, what went wrong? I think that is, there is a lot also that went right. One, but to be a good student, let me just answer the question that is posed, not my own question, right? One, the former Prime Minister ran on the platform of reform.
Okay.
That is scary.
Scary to who?
To the status quo people. AU have a very strong hold of, for example, West Africa and all that. And the status quo, any institution will resist reform. Prof here knows how hard it is to sell reform. And so the promise in Raila's agenda was reforming AU. And I thought that was so exciting, but at the same time dangerous. And I will tell you how it ended up being dangerous, because people don't automatically welcome reform. Number two, Kenya, Africa is not monolithic. Africa have trends, have patterns, have influences. Some of them, we are saying them here, from history, from sub-region and region, from diversity in terms of religion, from interest of who colonized who, to language, and therefore it's complex election. And and those come to bear, and sometimes steer election a different way. Finally, you know that Kenya first dealt with Djibouti in 2022 when they won the Security Council. Kenya had 128 votes, Djibouti only got 68. So we got the Security Council. we were backed up by the international community. So Kenya does very well in the multilateral.
Okay.
But we struggle when it comes to regional, because we struggle for this reason. We are a stabilizing factor. We are a big country. We are involved as a leader in the pack. And therefore, you will create a little bit of enemies. Right now, if you look at the BRICS influence in Kenya, in Africa, countries like South Africa are members of the BRICS. And therefore, it will be hard to imagine that the BRICS will want Kenya to shine, especially when it comes to regional. Therefore, the loss, let's call it that. Of course, it was after 6th round, and the former Prime Minister was doing very well. I like this discussion because there are some issues that are coming that are neither here or there. For example, the issue of age. The UN Security General himself is 78. Fauci, who led the US during COVID, was 82. And therefore the issue of age, we brought, Amina was very young, the same fate. So the issue of age is neither here. Oh, the Kenyans sang in a restaurant. Surely this union is for Africans.
But Daktari, how then do you then justify exporting our bad political mannerism to the diplomatic capital of the continent?
What is bad with singing during dinner? Africa sing when they farm, when they wed. We are a singing people. So what is wrong in your private dinner singing? You know, those are the oversimplification, and we know that we carried the same hate here, and we are being fantastic, phony, and fabulous fake by saying those are the reason. So if Prime Minister is in his hotel dinner and Kenyans sing, those who are there for him, how does that sabotage the diplomacy? Yet the diplomacy is done at the AU. Very few people had badges. They went there and operated. So how does that affect? Now think about it.
And what about, for example, then, because that audience in Addis is not accustomed to the outcome of our politics,
particularly Ethiopians.
So the point is then, in the aftermath of that, what is the image projected of Kenya out of the outcome itself for future references when the UDA party and the ODM party held a joint press conference in Addis? This is not the normal Ethiopian capital. It's the capital of the continent, is it?
Fair question. So is Kenya the capital of UNEP? Right? In 72, we got the capital. We are the only UN capital here. And we people still saying here, by the way. Now, over there, whatever happened, think of the member of parliament who sponsored themselves. All it shows is that Kenyans are excited about their union. That union is for the people. You cannot achieve regional integration without the people. So what is wrong if people go to observe their process? Now let me continue. Because people learn by participating. We come from a country where there's even public participation. So what is there? Look at the role of the member of parliament who sponsor themselves. We even have regional member of parliament in East African Assembly. We have the Treaty Ratification Act that requires that every treaty come to the National Assembly. This member of parliament cannot legislate in a vacuum. You need to understand the trend, the pattern, and what is happening in the region. Otherwise, if we work in silos that now this is about Kenya and the rest is about Africa, where are you going? So the oversimplification, oversimplification of Kenyans singing in their dinner surely cannot be fair.
Okay, well pointed, Dr. But public participation in Kenya is consequential, given that the report by any departmental committee will come before the House and is subject to a vote. Public participation in Addis is inconsequential.
It's a good democratic
The only one
process.
vote is that of the President. Suba, yesterday you conducted a presser and you strongly condemned the blame game among Kenyans over Raila Odinga's loss. What were your observations?
And it's tied to what Duncan Ojwang has just said. Yeah. You know, in the Constitutive Act of the African Union says affairs of the African Union shall be people-centered. And so the AU in itself and in its constitutive act and other facilitative instruments recognizes that at the center of everything that the AU does are the peoples of Africa. And the peoples of Africa in their diversity, were reflected there. When, for example, as you rightly say, there was a joint presser by, Kenya Kwanza and Azimio. Once you are outside the Republic of Kenya, the image, in fact, the candidate, it is not Raila who lost. It's Kenya that lost. It's in its endeavor to secure the position of chairperson of the African Union. And so for us as civil society people, and having been an election observer for the African Union, we took an intentional position that why can't we now go and observe the election of the African Union itself? Because the African Union has always sent me to Zimbabwe, Rwanda, and elsewhere to observe elections based on their own declaration of principles of democratic elections and so on and so forth. And you remember, the African Union recently instituted a raft of reforms. And we were going there to see how those reforms are taking root. And one of the most pleasant of them is, the provision and requirement that in light of those reforms, if a chairperson is male, then the deputy will be female and so on. And it did happen, despite the fact that Algeria, where, that produced the deputy chairperson had two candidates. So perhaps, had Kenya had 2 or 3, 4 candidates, perhaps we would today be saying Kenya lost because it had more candidates than one. Morocco had 2 candidates for deputy chairperson. Algeria the same. It's Libya and I think one other country that had 1 each. There were about 6 candidates for deputy chairperson. So we went there as civil society because the AU itself establishes an organ called the AU ECOSOC, the Economic and Cultural Council, that serves as the instrument through which civil society participates. And a lot of Kenyans and civil society groups, including my colleagues that were, calling for the release of Kizza Besigye, do not relate what we do locally with what happens at the region. Every year, civil society does what has become known as a pilgrimage to Banjul in the Gambia to raise issues of human rights, concern. Yet, where the politics happens, because the African Commission on Human and People's Rights does a commendable job, but do those things matter? So you need to be at the epicenter where politics happens to be able to understand why, the concerns we raise annually. And that's why we were there to tell, to come back and tell civil society in Kenya that it is important that as civil society actors, one, we enlist with the AU ECOSOC, we become observers at the AU, meetings and so on and so forth. And on that basis, hold the African Union accountable and responsible on its own human rights instruments, including, the various declarations they have made.
Accountability.
On the need to respect human rights.
In retrospect, you'll remember probably the only one, maybe one of the few, who consistently said that this was the wrong thing to do. It was a wrong fit. I understood that the rest of Africa particularly don't like large states to take over their continental institutions. I understood that. I understood that the Trump, I made that point about Trump and South Africa. And you saw what happened with the Southern African region and how they voted. I particularly also pointed out that it's very important for us to understand that the Francophone issue was going to play a major role, and it did. It played a decisive role. Macron had visited Djibouti before this election.
Correct.
So I think that they took our prime minister and put him in a context that the amount of bulwarks against him was insurmountable. And I saw that train coming. And I think this is part of Mr. Ruto's complete failure in foreign policy in this country since he took over. You remember that he went to Ukraine and blasted the Russians. who are now making peace with the Americans in Saudi Arabia. He took sides on that issue. And the Russians are not going to forget, and the Russians are very important players in this. In fact, the president of Ukraine wanted to address the National Assembly. The National Assembly said no. The National Assembly, with it being completely pro-Ruto, still saw it was a problem, and they did not want to take sides. Then the president came back again, and he talked about the Western Sahara. You remember when he was being inaugurated? He made another blunder there. He then made another blunder on Sudan today, after this debacle at the AU. Okay. So the president's foreign policy is going from one stumbling to another stumbling block. And I think it's important for him to realize that he's not an expert in this issue, and he needs to get expert advice from the people who know something about this, and that he should not run gung-ho with the foreign policy of this guy. It's embarrassing this country. There's another huge mistake was that he came and brought Hamdani, Hemedi, and met him at State House with the Sudanese flag. There are accusations that Mr. Hemeti was involved with Mr. Ruto in the elections, and this was payback time to support him. I mean, you know, if we get this country into this kind of situation, then all bets are off for us, Ayub. I remember the great Naguib Mahfouz, the Egyptian writer, who said that, you know, there are no heroes in my novels, because if you look at the hero worshipping that was going on in Addis Ababa, then you don't see the critical eye of the elections. And I think the mistake that was made was the Kenyan delegation that went there made us look bad. All those MPs who were shouting in the restaurants and dancing in the streets, this was an international affair. It has got nothing to do with singing. It was about hard-nosed diplomacy. And I think that we have to learn lessons from this thing. And if we don't learn lessons from this, we're going to fail again. Okay. And Prof, there is one major event which happened last year in Kenya and also in Uganda, where Dr. Besigye was abducted. I forgot about that.
Planning to attend a book launch in Nairobi. Yeah. And the martial court in Uganda then said the accusations were in the charge sheet that he was in possession of, a firearm, a pistol to be specific. Then the Supreme Court in January in Uganda ruled that a civilian or civilians should not be tried in military courts. It's unconstitutional, and now there are planned protests. How has this also informed our conduct, and what image did it project of Kenya, given that it happened on Kenyan soil, plus the Tanzanian human rights activist, Maria, who was also on the verge of being abducted, or if not for the city hopper driver. Yeah. What image is this projecting of Kenya?
Very good question.
Ayub, the question you are raising is legitimate and a good one. But you need to understand that there are complexity surrounding all the incidents you are citing, that you and I have no idea what happened behind. I said, open society like the US is everybody's there advocating for their human rights and what have you. Kenya is one of the only exceptions in Africa where anyone can come here and express themselves to the extent that cannot happen almost in any other part of Africa. Now, the circumstances under which Besigye came here and what the plan behind is something that is not public. We don't know what it is. Now, was Kenya complacent in its moving back to Uganda and to be tried? I don't know. The lady from Tanzania also came here the same way. Now, so the question is, and of course, President Ruto is the president of the country, so anything that happened must be on his head. The president is responsible. What happened to these people, and what kind of message is the country giving? So simply, we can close the gate, Ayub, and say nobody is welcome. You can't, like what Trump is trying to do. Is he going to succeed in doing that? The people were suffering in Congo. They're coming. It was not too long ago when President Ruto declared that Africans are welcome to come to Kenya. They're welcome to do their business. They're welcome to move toward becoming citizens. And you know, that goes with my, what I stated all over again. There should not be any refugee camp in Africa. There is refugees we have in Kakuma.
And Dadaab.
Integrate them.
Yeah.
If those people decide to become Kenya, they should be Kenya. If they want to go back to Sudan, they go back to Sudan. And the same thing with Uganda.
Yeah.
That refugee camp should not happen. There should not be any fight happen between Rwanda and DRC regarding M23. M23 need to settle. If that's what they choose to do, they need to settle in that area and become citizen of DRC. But you know, so the fight is over something else. It's over the interest of billions, trillions of dollars worth of mineral resources and what we have in this continent. The mineral resources in DRC is estimated worth over $30 trillion. That is the same thing with United States, equivalent. So you can see
GDP of the United States.
GDP of the United States. So you can see why everybody is out there. You know, why the killing is taking place and nobody cares. Now, is this going to happen in the capital city of Nairobi? If we don't watch it, that's what will happen. Okay. Who do you blame?
Other than, yes, Dr. Yes, please.
Yes. You know, we live in a multipolar world. I think Kenya, officially, their foreign policy is multi-aligned. Because we now have new powers, and it is more of how you cooperate with this state. The idea that the Europeans who gave us these borders we worship so much are getting rid of them in European Union. And are realizing that these borders are not have no basis, and the future is in integration and bigger market. And if you look at our federation, the political federation, the political part is coming. So sometimes we worship the borders too much. Now, if you are asking that question in the context of Raila AU election, clearly Kenya, with all its problem, have a better record in human rights than Djibouti. I don't think there's a question.
Of course.
And that is the hypocrisy that an issue is found here and there, and then it is said, you know, this is what made the African presidents annoyed. Now, which country can rival Africa, Kenya, even with its challenges in terms of human rights? Surely not Djibouti.
Yeah.
And that is putting things in context.
I agree.
Finally, when you look at...
Daktari, when you are known as a safe haven, good-mannered country, where even... Museveni himself, in his book, the second edition of the Mustard Seed, clearly mentions how he was a gun-carrying politician in Kenya, and he was enjoying the protection of the Kenyan government.
Absolutely.
But Daktari, when you are known to be a safe haven where people rent to, and they got a home to stay until their countries stabilize, isn't that more than disastrous in terms of reputational damage than Djibouti, which is known as a society or a country where its own people, they are struggling to see, hear, and read what the government basically says?
Yeah, no, I'm just bringing it in terms of that election was not done or lost based on Kenya democratic record. That one we have to be clear. But for example, you know, we have to deal with this thing on a case-by-case basis. For example, the lady from Tanzania, remember it was in the same media that she was requested, do you feel safe in Kenya? She said yes. Do you want to leave? No. Now, if you have done refugee law, you know very well that refugees are people who are not willing are able to be
Because of persecution.
subject of protection of their country. But when you, or of that protecting country. But when you are saying, even with that incident, she's saying, I feel safe here.
Yeah.
Here, right here. There are so many people that call this place home. And one thing we must get right, Kenya is a young country, but we always get our politics right because we have that value that we always talk, bicker and all that, but heal ourselves over and over, whether we call it handshake or whatever, we have a way of going back to the center. Right now in the Raila AU, you even saw the former deputy president wishing him well. That is good. You even saw the former deputy president welcoming back with an open arm. Those are things that are a mystery in other countries. And therefore, where the Kenya record, is it perfect or no? But it stands as a giant here. And he said
that's precisely why it lost.
The very reason that people will have a problem having such a stabilizing country at the helm of leadership. And that's the reality. Not weakness,
but interestingly, despite, of course, I'm one of those who normally complain about, human rights repression, abduction, and so on. But when you go out there, people are so proud of Kenyans. They say you people are daring, Even in the protest yesterday, I saw my colleagues, calling for the release of Kizza Besigye, which is a very, very good thing because they look to Kenya. They look to Kenya. There was a Ugandan national in that press conference.
Yes.
There was the Tanzanian lady. You cannot dare do that in our neighboring countries. You can't. You'll be frog marched from there. And they'll not care whether you left your stuff in a hotel room and so on. And so, despite all these challenges that we face, I think, and Djibouti, I mean, people talk about dynasty. The Djibouti administration is a typical dynasty. Even the current chair, who was just elected, comes from the extended family of the head of state. And that's the basis on which he has served as foreign affairs minister for 15 years. You don't serve for 15 years foreign affairs minister in a democracy. It means, you are serving a particular utility and purpose in government, and so on and so forth. So I do not want to suggest that Kenya lost because of its human rights record, because really there's no country in Africa that can hold a candle against Kenya's human rights credential, because we are all but by and large most countries view Kenyans, not Kenya, the Kenya government, Kenyans as people who are resilient, who are able to push back and so on and so forth. And for us is something we should be proud of, despite the many challenges that we face. But the dynamics that we saw, when you are an observer, you see things from a distance. The dynamics we saw, and especially with the elections, and particularly after the first two rounds in which Kenya did very well. Had all these things we are saying been in place, to be the way that things were going to be the template. Kenya would have lost outright from the first to second and so on, and would not have lasted. And even during in 2017 when Amina Mohamed contested, she also lost on the 7th round. So Kenya is a force, but traditionally, and having worked for the AU as an election observer, traditionally there's been this understanding that the chairmanship of the secretariat be left to smaller countries. And it so happens that most of those smaller countries are Francophone. And that's why you have seen the leadership, rotate from Mali to what?
Except
South Africa. South Africa decided to disrupt that tradition because, most of these African countries do not even remit, their subscription. And they were saying, we are one of the funders, Nigeria, Kenya here. And so we are trying to, disrupt that. And
I'll come to you, Professor
Ayub. I don't agree with my colleague. I think it's a very good argument. I specifically said here that the whole process of getting the 2/3 majority, where you go to round 1, round 2, round 3, round 4, is precisely set up so that the big countries don't get through. I said it here. In the beginning, they will make the commitment to the big state and say, we'll give you the first vote. Then they give him the second round vote. But they're hedging their bets on the fifth, sixth vote because they already know what the gap of the states is going to be. So the African Union system is set up in a way that will just get these big states out. On the case of South Africa, which served one term.
Which it didn't even finish.
It didn't even finish. South Africa brought its power to bear in the continent. It went everywhere and made sure that they really fought because it was postponed. Remember, the election was postponed.
Yeah.
But Ayub, you know, at the crux of this African Union issue is how impossible it is for us to make decisions about this continent on our own. There is a massive interference in this continent's politics, whether it is regional, whether it's a nation state, or whether it's the African Union. And this just shows you the amount of neo-imperialism that is now everywhere. We have about 6 to 7 states in this continent that have failed. Sudan has become the largest humanitarian problem in the world. In 2025, armed thugs took on Kizza Besigye and took him out of Nairobi. There's a government in this town. I think that President's foreign policy experience should not, particularly about the Middle East, shouldn't be a trip to Dubai to have biryani. Okay. That should not be the experience of our president, that we eat biryani in Dubai and you know what's going on in the Middle East. This is ridiculous. What we need to do is to let the foreign policy practitioners in the Foreign Office, and I'm sure they're totally frustrated with what is going on at State House. And I think that we have to be very, very open about what we need to do. President, as Mr. Noah will tell you, the president's foreign policy is his foreign policy. It's not the permanent secretary and it's not the Minister of Foreign Affairs. They can advise him. They can talk to him about it. But President is a zoologist. He's not a political economist. He needs to let the people who know this do their job.
Yes, Prof, before I come to you.
Okay.
And gentlemen, largely, Ahmed, but still a follow-up on you. They talk about solution for Africa's problems from Africa. I mean, he mentions Sudan, there's the DRC, the Sahel. And if you critically observe the replacement of the French factor who are driven out, the French, it's the Russians who are replacing that through their proxies, including the this outfit which was headed by Yevgeny Prigozhin. Trying to forget. Okay, I
forgot the name too.
But isn't that, Ahmed, then, and Prof, you'll respond to that, then a reinvention of the Soviet empire? Because I'm looking at what Russia lost in Ukraine. More than half of its 7,300 tanks it had in storage are gone. Of those remaining, only 500 can be reconditioned quickly. By April this year, it's projected Russia will run out of its T-80 tanks. And last year, it lost twice as many artillery systems as its preceding years in Ukraine. Recruiting contract soldiers is getting more expensive. A general mobilization will be politically risky for Putin. Public opinion survey clearly shows that Russians want a war to end.
Great question.
Then are we not reinventing another power in Africa at the expense of driving another
Noah and I are experts on this field. Let me say a few words and I'll give it to my senior.
I'll come to you, Prof.
The first thing is that the very idea of something called a liberal hegemony has collapsed in the Ukrainian fields. The idea that NATO could come to Ukraine and place intercontinental ballistic missiles at 10 seconds away from Moscow has failed. The ideology of the United States of regime change has failed. Donald Trump has gone back to isolationism. And sooner or later he's going to end this idea of a global policeman. It is very critical for us to understand that international relations today has morphed into what is called Realpolitik. The reach of the United States towards Russia has failed. That means that the Chinese and Russian relationship has said that we're going to have a multipolar system in this world, and American unilateralism is not going to be the international relations of the world. And I think that this is a good thing. It's a positive thing. And Noah will tell you in 1 minute that Mr. Putin is wrong. He will tell you that China is no good.
Yes.
On here, he's my teacher. But we disagree with Mr. Noah on this issue. And I think that we need a very strong multipolar world in this international relations, and not America as the policeman of the world.
Yes, Prof.
Ayub, let's talk about who lost. The person who lost is not Raila Odinga. It is Africa, the continent, that lost. And there are three factors that I want to talk about. One is how well was the candidate prepared. And I tell you, there is from Amina, who's my really good friends, to everyone else. This was like oil machine organized in the campaign. It started in a rocky step, then all of us were brought in to check how far we've done, how well we are, where we're going from today. From that time, it started moving like machine. So collectively, from the president to Mudavadi, to the two key people, Ambassador Correa, Ambassador Dembo, they were moving with the framework on which we lay out. And so then what happened? The opposition, the language that was coming out of Kenya has never happened before in any election. It was the most lethal of all and translated in almost all African language. And friends that I have, the group that were working in Ethiopia, were astonished. He said, are these Kenyans? You know, what is happening? And some of them are pseudo-politicians and pseudo-intellectuals who are interpreting to know Kenya. And they're talking as if Raila's gone for money, so money can return to Kenya. You know, that little belittle, thing. That's why Raila is there. And Raila is not the right candidate. So the issue is, this fellow from Djibouti, granted, he understands international relations and everything. We understand international relations much more deeper than he does. And the point is, where is Pan-Africanism? Where does it go? Where is what the forefather envisioned, which include Caribbean, includes the Americas, that hold the black nations coming together? Where does it go? It went down the window because of this broker candidate. Djibouti is a broker state. Everybody is there, isn't it? Everybody is a beachhead. China is a beachhead. Europe is a beachhead. America is a beachhead.
India.
So, India. Turkey.
The Saudis.
Saudis.
Even Japan.
With Japan. So who was the chief broker that brought about that situation? Did we talk about that? No. Is he going to broker the rest of Africa? That's the big question. Secondly, are Africans really serious, ready to unite and support each other and be serious about leadership of this continent? Are they? Now, Francophone, Lusophone, Anglophone, and then degenerate into tribalism. So are we a nation state under God with one constitution?
Can I just add to you?
Let him finish.
Let me finish. What I want to say, my friend, is 1963, December 1963, I was a little kid. And my father, Walter, took me to this Kiwanja where we got independent. And I'd never seen that thing stay with me up to now. My father was tall, over 6 feet, a very, very big guy. And he was wearing Nigeria clothes. And he got down and kissed the soil with his tongue.
That generation.
And I was looking at him, and I said, why did you do that? And he said, my son, we are free. He looked at me. That is what I remember Kenya about. And when Kenyatta came around and said, Harambee, you know, the Kenya people was like machine. Now, what has happened to us? Are we still the same nation? You know, Ethiopians, if you look at the net right now, the Gen Zs in Ethiopia are raising question. What happened? Because Raila has become an enigma for the young people in Ethiopia. And they say, what happened to our Baba? That's what Ethiopians are saying. Why was it not? Lastly, I will just want to make the last point. Pressure from outside is in to broker Africa for their own interest. And Africa is open for the time. And the candidate we have is going to promote that.
Okay.
That is what Africa lost.
Yes, Dr. Sorry.
Yes. Ultimately, I believe good will prevail over evil. Even the theme of AU was reparation for African people of African descent. And that is a very timely theme. And so allow us to question our optimism if the person who is at the helm can drive that. And if Djibouti, which has all the bases of the world, because I've been involved in Red Sea Task Force, trying to use that biggest sea, which does 30% of world trade, to help Africa and to leverage on it and to be something that Africa can benefit. But you find Djibouti always prefer bilateralism. Everyone has a base and everyone has an interest, and it becomes very hard because when somebody is speaking, you don't know who is really speaking beside the person you are seeing. So, but that issue of reparation and that issue of justice is what we want even in our country. Equality. Fair distribution of resources, moving people who are in the margin to the center, and leaving no one behind. And I think that that conversation is very important, starting at the continental level and even here. When I went to the hall and I saw the Palestinian president, I knew that the geopolitics and geostrategy and geoconnection has come to bear, because you can understand that that is a real issue, a contemporary issue.
I said that here.
A very important issue.
Yep.
And so the AU had the Palestinian president.
Yep.
And therefore, you can tell the trend of the thinking. But I think we have agreed. At
the time, did it cross your mind that the president had taken a contrary position to the AU's position on what Israel had done in Gaza and since 1948 when it was created, and the gross human rights violations which was meted upon the Palestinian people?
I think AU had a recommendation on the Palestinian issue.
Recommendation, but it said it also condemned the long decades of atrocities committed against the Palestinians.
Abu Mazen has a seat at the African Union high table.
And that its position was very clear, but President Ruto tweeted, Israel needs protection against terrorism. Kenya stands in solidarity with Israel. October the 7th is when he tweeted, 9:33 p.m. Nairobi time.
Yeah, and you can tell that countries and states have different interests. And at the end of the day, Kenya is at the place where it has the UN headquarters and all that, and therefore it has to play safe on some of these things. But my issue is, maybe we might need to get rid of secret voting in the AU. And that is giving that as a way to show that right now we don't know who voted for Kenya or voted against it. It is mere speculation. And number two, again, to tie issue a little bit, the Sudan conflict is at the epicenter of the problems in the region. Mwagiru says that conflict holds key to the peace in South Sudan. It is the spillover effect we are seeing around, and therefore I want to recommend any effort to fix that conflict. Finally, the issue of African solution for African problem. Actually, I go further to say African solution for problems in Africa created somewhere else. Most of those, so one, they're not even our problem.
Yes.
Most of them are other people's problem, but they are given to us, and therefore we agree. But isn't it interesting? Because we talk of America exceptionalism and all that. We say the powerful always have their way, the weak will have to live with whatever is. That's realism. him in international relation. But at the end of the day, don't you see the pattern that when it comes to a problem that affects Western countries, it's a universal problem. When it comes to a problem that affects us, that become a local issue, a domestic issue, or tribalism, or ethnic problem. And therefore, I am one person who believes that Africa can only go far if we do multilateralism and not bilateralism.
Yes, Suba, of interest, would you mind following up on how much was spent to bankroll Odinga's campaigns for public accountability?
Yes, I mean, okay, I've never worked for government, so I have no idea. The elections were just concluded the other day. Of course, I've seen, politicians raise it. But, if I were an MP and I'm able to put a question on the floor of Parliament, then that would bring out accountability. One thing that we never discussed in this country, and I saw a lot of that discussion about, politicians from Odinga's strongholds who would wish that he fails so that they can continue to hang on his coattail. One thing we never discussed, and I think it's time we discussed it, how many in regions or areas of this republic rely on being seen to be anti-Odinga to rejuvenate their political career. Being anti-Odinga is an election or re-election strategy. And I saw a politician playing it out very well. Is it for accountability? That is the clever way of putting it. But the real politics out there, and today he's a hero. I saw a battery of lawyers behind him. It is time we discussed how, why, and perhaps there are quarters in this republic that never wanted Odinga to win because who will they call names in 2027? Who will they call names?
Okay.
And it works for them. It works for them. It is time we discuss this.
I think there is
Whereas there could have been people in Odinga's strongholds who wanted him to come back so that there are also those who cannot imagine politics without Odinga.
So of course. The outcome is the same on both sides.
Exactly.
Right. The mobilizing effect.
The mobilizing effect of
Ayub, we don't want to make this an ODM press statement. What we want to do is there's nobody who's been, I'm one of the founders of that party. Nobody has been closer to the old man than I am. The question is whether or not Mr. Odinga's antennae, Mr. Ruto wanted him to go to the AU so that he would be free, have a free hand in the elections here. He would adopt Odinga's base. He's at the AU. But now we know that I can tell you for a fact, and my predictions have never been wrong, Mr. Odinga is going to become a prime minister in this country. There's no question about that in my head. The reason he's going to become a prime minister is because Mr. Ruto doesn't have any constituency that's going to vote for him right now. So what they want to do is defeat someone called Gen Z. So the entire political establishment of whatever hue and ethnicity want to make sure the political class stays, because this transformation of the Gen Z is the most dangerous thing this country has ever encountered, where people have come to the fore and they've said, we have issues. Well, the rest of the political class is talking about Mungiki, talking about Chinkororo, talking about Mount Kenya, the lake, that old custard that they kept on shoving down our throat. That's practically coming out to the end. And I think that Mr. Odinga, and this is why I broke with him, made a strategic error in joining the political class. And in that way, people who are saying that everybody is happy that Odinga failed in the AU, they were not failed, they were angry at him. The Kenyan population, many of the people, and it was not a Kikuyu affair, it was not a Somali affair, it was not a Luo affair. There was a lot of people in this country who just believed that Mr. Odinga chose the wrong side at the end of the day, and that is where the anger was with the AU. Okay. Now, lastly, last point is I just want to say that unless we understand that the African continent has huge political and economic issues to deal with, the AU will remain meaningless. The guy who's now the AU chairman comes from a country whose president is like, remember Haiti?
Yeah.
Remember that Papa Doc Duvalier?
Oh, yeah.
And Baby Doc Duvalier? And the Tom Tom Macoute?
Same.
It's a dictatorship.
Okay. Gentlemen, let's now sample the feedback in a while. But first, the East African Court of Justice has called on the East African Legislative Assembly, the Council of Ministers and the member states to remit the financial contributions to ensure the court can fulfill its mandate. Speaking at a two-day stakeholders meeting in Kigali, the capital of Rwanda, the court highlighted ongoing financial constraints that have persisted for 2 years, severely limiting its operations. Citizen TV's Walter Zuya with the details from the Rwandan capital.
Court officials warned that funding shortages have hampered key legal proceedings and contributed to a growing backlog of cases. EACJ President Nestor Kayobera stressed the urgent need for adequate financial support to uphold the rule of law across the region.
But despite the challenges, the court has undergone substantial growth since its inception. These include increased confidence in the court based on the number of cases filed, developed jurisprudence, enhanced accessibility through establishment of sub-registries in the capital city of the partner states, and the use of case management and the recording system.
Meanwhile, East African Community EAC Secretary General Veronica Nduva has urged stakeholders to commit to strengthening legal institutions for the benefit of the region's 300 million citizens.
It is important that we make people aware of what the court does, how the court exists, how the court can help. So I wish, in a very simple way, to urge that even as we have the deliberations within the confines of this space, let us not forget the citizen at the borders.
At the same time, the court highlighted the need to embrace out-of-court settlements to deal with challenges of backlog. The conference brings together key policymakers and judicial officers to explore solutions to the financial and operational challenges facing the court. Zuya Walter, for Citizen News, Kigali, Rwanda.
Gentlemen, thanks, Zoya. Let's now sample the feedback. The hashtag on X is Citizen Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. Here is what you are saying. On X, the first one from Bobo Tiano Oweno, he says, hosting of sanctioned Sudan's RSF members to form a parallel government in Kenya will sever more relations diplomatically with local and international countries. Talai_Kilel says Kenya is becoming a key battleground for Sudan's political factions. Hosting the RSF could have diplomatic repercussions, especially if the group's agenda worsens regional stability. Sir Nixon Degura says, I think Kenya handled AUC elections how it does local politics, much more than doing geopolitics. Even the nitty-gritty, like celebrating win too much before the results, was annoying. Otherwise, dirty politics hurts diplomacy real hard. Godi Barasawere says our country, Kenya, keeps stumbling and faltering in terms of foreign policy. The president should immediately seek for professional admonishment on foreign policy and avoid conflicting backing of the Sudan rebel group in the country. Engineer Lazaro says it's devastating to watch some Kenyans celebrate the nation's loss on the international stage. Where is our patriotism? Petty politics is dividing this country right now, right down the middle, with tribal cocoons masquerading as national leaders. Gentlemen, much appreciated for your presence and time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes,
Professor, your last word, please.
You're always great.
You're always great, yeah.
Closing remark?
That's the best.
The program closed.
Much appreciated.
Yeah.
So I bet in 10 seconds.
Yes, I'm saying that I saw the excitement because the promise of Raila for infrastructural development, the China Belt Road and all that, were really coming to bear and develop some of the regions and Mau Mau roads and the roads in Nyanza and all that. So I excuse people if there was a little bit enthusiasm because of that. Now the hypocrisy of saying Raila is old but come back and fight for us. You see, that is now speaking from tongue in cheek. But we saw a good fight. We want to thank the bulwark of Korir and the president and all the team. They worked very hard for this, and we know that we live to fight another day.
And yeah, I should be, don't want to be congratulated for being correct. I felt terrible that our Prime Minister lost, but objectively we have a responsibility to tell the Kenyan people, educate them and talk to them about what is happening without fear, without favor, so that they can make an educated analysis themselves. And that is the way for us to go in broadcasting and in the media.
Gentlemen, I appreciate your time. I give you 30 seconds, Prof.
That time has come for this country to be united under one God, under one constitution. Less than that, we split into worse ethnic groups, tribalism, everything. And so, forget it, people. We have to change for the better of this country.
Yes, Oba.
Mine is to re-emphasize our call yesterday that let us not use the outcome of the AU elections to polarize and to ethnicize and to divide and sow seeds of division in the country.
Dr. Duncan Ojwang is lecturer on regional integration and diplomatic law. Thank you for your time. Ahmed Hashi, foreign policy commentator. Professor Noah Midamba, defense and foreign policy expert, senior associate at GLOSEPS, the chairperson of Moi University Council, headed to the city of Eldoret from here. Suba Churchill is the chairperson of the Horn of Africa Civil Society Forum. Thank you for your time. And thanks to you too for waking up with us here on the broadcast. The hashtag, as ever, has been Citizen Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. We're here for you always, dear Kenyan viewer. Up next is Health and Lifestyle with Safina Chiengoma. Good morning. Amazing.